All right, what it do, baby? We back. So this is Sean Foo. Mexico sides with China over $102 billion deals. Beijing dumps more USD for gold. USD is US dollar. This is like a financial channel that I watch, and I think he's from somewhere else. I don't know exactly, but I don't think he's in America.
Alright guys, so let's talk about Mexico and let's talk about China. What do they have in common? Well, they have both been threatened by Trump's trade war. This is your economic apocalypse update and things, well, they're getting worse one day at a time. We are beginning to see Mexico and China close ranks as we get closer and closer to a new US president. A few weeks ago, Trump threatened to slap China and Mexico with trade tariffs, an additional 10% for China and a flat rate of 25% for Mexican imports coming into the US. And this is very scary for Mexico, and we can't overstate how much of a shock this is. The US accounts for over 83% of Mexican exports, so the threat of a tariff is very real. And whether Trump is bluffing or not, the Mexicans, they have to view it as a clear and present danger. A big part of this threat revolves around China making stuff in Mexico and shipping it to the US. Thanks to NAFTA, goods made in Mexico can be shipped to the US tariff-free. It's obvious that Trump wants to close this loophole. It's a hint to Mexico to kick Chinese companies out. But something interesting just happened. Mexico is scrambling to reassure Chinese investors. We have Mexican envoys rushing to tell Chinese companies that Mexico is still a fantastic destination to invest in. This is an important move that we can't ignore. It tells us how shrewd the Mexicans are and why, like many other countries in the world, playing both sides is necessary to survive. The US is the top dog today, but it's a declining economic power. China is facing a ton of US sanctions, but it's a rising dragon. Mexico needs both. They still need Chinese factories coming in. Listen to this. It doesn't matter if it's from Japan, from Germany, from China, it becomes a Mexican company and it becomes part of the regional supply chain. This is a statement from the counselor at the Mexican embassy in China. So we know
But that's how people work capitalism, though. You always want to work the loophole so you get the best price or make the most profit, right? You're not trying to pay the people the most or help the society the most. You're competing. You want to make the most money, and you use the tariffs and the NAFTA and all the different laws and loopholes to do so.
Mexico is serious about preserving Chinese investment. It's critical we understand the scale of Chinese money pouring to Mexico, and we need to put things into context as well. We know Trump has threatened John Deere with huge tariffs if they manufacture in Mexico, so it's very likely investments from US companies could be drying up in 2025 and beyond. Conversely, Chinese industries are setting up shop in Mexican cities. Chinese direct investment reached a 13-year high last year. Capital expenditure itself has surged to $5.6 billion. And since 2020, the arrival of new Chinese firms in Mexico has almost tripled. And if you're Mexico, you want this to happen. As US companies leave, they take jobs away with them. Chinese companies will more than compensate for this. Just the value of Chinese investments isn't enough. We must also view this through a quality lens. What types of companies are
So I wonder if China will be building infrastructure in Mexico like they are in Africa and other places. Like they're building like big ports and factories and all kinds of roads and bridges all through Africa. So stuff that you can't take out, right? Like how in the U.S. we put a little bit of stuff in, but when we leave, we leave. And what China puts in, it's like a huge infrastructure. We don't do that. So I wonder if they're going to do that in Mexico.
coming to Mexico, because what China is providing is the future of global trade. They aren't building luxury boutiques or sweatshops. Chinese companies are building critical industries in Mexico. In 2023, nearly $4 billion of major FDIs were announced in the country. Over 70% of this came in the automotive sector. And we are talking about cars and EVs, high value products being built in Mexico. The second highest sector is machinery, technology, and electronics. And once again, Mexico is climbing the value chain with Chinese money. And that provides better paying jobs and turns the country into a modern manufacturing hub. If Mexico sides completely with the US to secure their exports, This eventually will hurt the future of their industries. Trump wants to bring back US manufacturing, that much is clear, especially in cars and heavy industries. And if America can satisfy their own domestic demand, where does that leave Mexico out in the cold? So it's a delicate balance to be struck. The Mexican president is already admitting Chinese companies are wary of Mexico. BYD has not given a firm proposal for their EV plant in the country, so Mexico has to play ball or these plants could shift to Latin America, including Brazil. Because one way or another, Chinese EVs will enter Mexico. It would either be made in the country and create jobs, or it will be made elsewhere. And once you understand this, it's clear as day that Mexico won't abandon China. There's simply too much at stake here. The trade war between the US and China also benefits the Mexicans. Trump is most definitely going to hike tariffs on Chinese goods, and as a result, exports are going to fall. Since Trump took office in 2016, a clear trend has been forming. Because of US tariffs, Chinese exports to Mexico has flown up, especially after 2020. Chinese companies are selling a ton of intermediate goods and inputs to their factories in Mexico. And this gets manufactured into goods and gets pushed into the US consumer market import tax free. Now, this might look like China's winning, and they are, but Mexico also charges tariffs for Chinese goods coming in. It's way
Sorry for the pause there.
less than the US for sure, but it's Chinese companies paying the tariffs to bring in the inputs for assembly or production in Mexico. So Chinese companies are bringing in factories, they're bringing in expertise, investment, and government revenue. And that's why no matter what Trump says, Mexico-China relations won't break. And this number alone tells us why. In 2023, bilateral trade between them amounted to over $100 billion. The year-on-year increase was almost 12%, a strong double-digit rise. Think of the number of jobs and industries these trading deals support. Abandoning China for the US is impossible. You'll close off growth in 2025 and beyond. And this is where things get really wild. US companies themselves still need imports from China. Closing trade directly with Beijing or through Mexico is unthinkable. Costs will simply shoot up. In a hilarious report, we find that Trump's tariff plan has a $64 billion import hole. It seems US importers themselves, American companies, are underreporting purchases to dodge the tariffs. And the numbers simply don't add up. In December, China exported $427 billion worth of goods to the US. However, import numbers only show $343 billion. So there's a big shortfall of $64 billion. Something is missing. And this tells us how dependent American businesses and consumers are on Chinese goods. People and companies, they simply want low prices. How is this even possible? How do importers get away with this? Well, it's thanks to this weird loophole called the de minimis rule. US buyers themselves are finding tactics to dodge the Trump tariffs. According to the rule, small packages valued at less than $800 don't get counted or tariffed by the US. And since 2023, exports of small packages have effectively doubled. So companies big and small can definitely exploit this. Instead of placing a big order for Chinese materials, they could split it into multiple orders under $800. The average person on the street can still get their stuff from China. Most orders, well, they'll be under $800 anyway. Chinese brands like Temu and Shein won't be collapsing anytime soon. So actions have consequences. Trump's tariffs won't tear China and Mexico apart. It could actually drive them closer together. US consumers themselves are finding loopholes. And this is where we must talk about China and gold. Because Beijing is about to turn up the de-dollarization fire once again. For the last 6 months, China stopped buying gold, and we mentioned how it wasn't too much of a concern. Over the last 12 months, gold went from under $2,000 to over $2,700. It has corrected down to $2,650, but that's almost still a 30% return year to date. China is just like any other gold buyer. They're just like you and me. They rather buy gold at a cheaper price than at record highs. They know the dollar is a hot potato and it's better to store their earnings in bullion. So they stepped off the pedal. Trump's win also sent the dollar soaring, so the price of gold took a breather, it corrected down. Well, all that is about to change, guys. China is back buying tons of gold, and this is when prices are near record highs. China isn't an accidental buyer, it's a clear sign that Beijing has made their calculations, they've punched in the numbers, they've decided to exit their holdings of US assets, and gold is a very important alternative for them. The Chinese bought another 160,000 troy ounces last month, and this is equivalent to 5 tons of gold bullion added to the vaults in Beijing. Since September, China has increased their vast holdings by 15%. This incredible jump is a de-dollarization signal to the world. It's their Batman signal to BRICS and other countries to diversify away from the dollar.
Have you heard about the salt
Learn
trick that's
about
making men
BRICS
stay
if you
hard for
haven't heard
hours in
about
bed? It might sound bizarre, but
And we must look through the lens of China. Over the last month alone, we had two critical events erupt. Firstly, Trump threatened to tariff Chinese imports, so trade with the US could definitely drop. China needs to do more business with the world. Secondly, Trump also threatened BRICS with his dollar threat. If you de-dollarize, you risk a 100% tariff on goods coming into the US market. As the US moves towards protectionism, China is trying to globalize the world further to trade, and to do that, China needs to sell more and they need to buy more. We have seen this chart 100 times now, but it still bears repeating. In 2023, China's share of cross-border trade in RMB surpassed the dollar. Nearly 53% of transactions happen in RMB instead of the US dollar, and this trend will only continue as Trump takes office next year. In fact, it could fly to the moon as the US isolates itself. This is the predominant trend in global trade. But another question arises: if Trump tariffs the world and global trade with China grows, there would be fewer dollars circulating around. And if that's the case, there could be big consequences for US assets. We could see foreign countries abandon traditional assets like US Treasury bonds. More money could flow into gold. And we have to take the threat to BRICS seriously. Yes, it's needless provocation. The dollar is still the reserve currency of the world. However, the more times you slap the world with this threat, the more they will diversify away. It's a reminder to everyone of one simple fact: the US, they need the world to use dollars and recycle them back into US assets, or the house of cards could collapse pretty quickly. Now, this trend of countries shuffling their central bank reserves is already happening, and going forward, gold is going to be a clear winner from this. Since 2015, the dollar share in reserves has dropped from 65% to 58%, and that's a very big drop considering it's hardly even 10 years. Meanwhile, the price of gold during that same period has gone from $1,200 to well over $2,300 in June this year. That's an incredible bull run, and it's money coming from institutions. And this is just during Biden's term. With Trump coming back, he could supercharge this trend and send prices soaring even higher. His plan of a trade war is one thing. Trying to bring back US industries would also mean spending a ton of money and, as a consequence, a weaker dollar. So either way, currency debasement is going to continue. The only question left is how bad can it get? If it goes all the way, pedal to the metal, the US might make de-dollarization a whole lot worse. But let me know what you think. Will Mexico abandon?
Okay, so that was Sean Foo or Sean Fo, Seanfoo, talking about the economics of China, Mexico, US, how Mexico might be leaving the US a little bit, working more with China, and now we got breaking points talking about how in the last interview that Trump had, sorry if you hear the outside noise, there's the living in an apartment, lots of stuff around. But anyway, Trump, okay, so they're talking about Trump talking about making Mexico and Canada states. So that's kind of the exact opposite. Obviously, Mexico would be working quite a lot more and more directly with all of us in the U.S. if they were actually a state. So let's hear that.
Interview that he gave to NBC News, Kristen Welker. The big top line was about trade with Canada and Mexico. He suggested perhaps if we're going to subsidize these two countries, they should just become the 51st and the 52nd states. Let's take a listen.
We're subsidizing Canada to the tune of over $100 billion a year. We're subsidizing Mexico for almost $300 billion. We shouldn't be subsidizing. Why are we subsidizing these countries? If we're going to subsidize them, let them become a state. We're subsidizing Mexico, and we're subsidizing.
What's funny is I'm all for this. To be honest, I would like to, let's make Canada probably several states. Mexico, the same, probably several states. But what we need to do is everybody needs to grow, but not in an imperialist manner, in a cooperative manner. Like he's saying, we're giving them subsidies and all this and that. All right, so if you're already like a state that we're just sharing with, like Alabama puts in less taxes than say like a California or Texas, so they get more back than they actually put in, where California puts out more than they get back in the whole pie of federal taxes and whatnot. So yes, I think we should grow in a non-imperialistic way, but that is such a left-wing idea. You're talking about open borders, right? If you make Mexico a state or several states, you just open that border, you moved it down, but then after a while, I'm not exactly sure what's right below Mexico, like Paraguay or something, Central America, I know that, but start making them states. The thing is, we shouldn't have broken up the Ottoman Empire or the USSR. The bigger the states, the easier it is to work with more people because they're already under one kind of thing, like the United States. We got our 50 states. It's pretty easy to work with Hawaii. If you're from like anywhere and you're working with the U.S., you can work with any state within the U.S. basically. But I digress. Let Trump keep going.
In Canada, and we're subsidizing many countries all over the world. And all I want to do is
subsidizing many countries all over the world. And if we make all of these country states, but not like make them states, like apply them to be states, ask them if they want to be, and then eventually it won't be the United States of America, to be the United Providence of Earth, or the United Countries, or the United whatever peoples of Earth, right?
have a level, fast, but fair playing field.
Confirms some of the reporting that apparently he had told Justin Trudeau. He's like, look, if we're going to pay you this much, then you might as well become a state.
Listen, Saagar, you add Mexico, Canada, and Puerto Rico. You got 3 new states. The Democrats actually have a shot at winning at
but
the Senate
level. But there's no chance. So. Think about it. Well, first of all, Mexico
I'm not taking it. I'm just
how
joking.
many states are in Mexico? I don't actually know. It's a lot.
And how many provinces in Canada?
Oh man, this is 5.
I don't know.
5 was what came to my mind as well.
Okay, so we've got Quebec, BC, Ontario,
Nova Scotia.
What's Calgary? Is that a province or is that a city?
Yeah, Calgary's a city.
Okay.
That's.
But it's in
I think
something. All right, sorry, Canadians.
Exposing our Canadian ignorance here.
Yeah. Hey, that's better than most Americans.
You said British Columbia.
Yeah, I
right.
said BC.
Isn't New Brunswick? Isn't that its own?
New Brunswick. Oh shit, Newfoundland. Is that its own one?
Yeah,
and then the Northern Territories. But I don't know if that's a province or if it's like Indian territory.
Yeah.
Or whatever. Sorry.
We did okay.
Anyway, yeah, we did pretty well. I would say that's decent for an American political commentator. Mexico, don't even get me started. Oh, the only reason I know Mexican states is because of drug cartels. It's like Tijuana, Sinaloa, or Mazatlan, or whatever. That's the only reason.
Indictment of our media. That's all we know.
Indictment of our media. This is a media show. She's indicting herself.
Point. But anyways,
good
that's
point.
what he's suggesting.
Saagar is also good pointing the indictment of himself.
In terms of some of the trade work, actually, arguably the most important ones that he put forward.
31 states in Mexico.
Oh my God, that's crazy. I can barely name 5, and they're only the ones like around.
31 states in Mexico. She just said that if you made Mexico a state, Canada a state, and Puerto Rico a state, that they would all vote Democrat. When didn't the Latinos just all move towards Trump more than they ever have before in history? Wasn't that one of the big stories in this election?
Around the United States. Shows my own ignorance. Let's get to Trump's comments on Ukraine. Arguably, this is the most important.
Okay, well, Ukraine's not as... So, again, we just went over the economics of China working with Mexico, and then Trump wanting to make Mexico a state. So I just thought that was kind of ironic. I had watched both these videos. I didn't watch the first one. I watched this video some. But yeah, so different outlooks on Mexico. I'd like them to become a state and work with Mexico. Double up. And so there it is.